How's it going, everybody? I'm Jeff Slakey here again with the Shelton School District, and we are continuing our conversations through the Employee Assistance Program. And today's going to be a really fun and interesting topic that a lot of folks are becoming more aware about. I'm with Anisa Miller here in Shelton. Her offices are on 4th between Railroad and Coda, and she's going to kind of talk with me a little bit about mindfulness and awareness. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm well, and I'm excited to talk about this here. Mindfulness and awareness seems to have kind of crept into the consciousness of the public here, especially over the last couple of years in relation to the pandemic and how we not only relate to ourselves but to each other and our surroundings. But I know it's got a long history before that. Briefly, can you just explain where you know the concepts of mindfulness to almost originate, and then we'll go from there?
Well, mindfulness in the last really 30 years, it started to pick up in a little bit more in the 1990s, because before that, there was some resistance to learning about that, because in the 60s with, who was it? Is it Timothy Leary?
Yeah,
and the psychedelics and meditation. There was a bias when someone would talk about meditation / mindfulness, which you often hear in the same interchangeably. But then in the 1990s, I don't know if it was when we could do imagery of the brain.
Yeah.
That's when it started to pick up a little bit more, and then there was some research that started to get done, and that increased because when they could see the results in the brain, and they were getting some good outcomes from it. It just started to go up and up and up, and now we just have thousands of studies now, and they're still going on. It almost feels like a magic pill every time you turn around. Oh, and mindfulness helps this too. You know, so you look a little closer. Is this too good to be true? But
it's interesting too, and I've read some studies and research on how it's helped veterans coming back from wars, especially in war settings like that. Let's go back to that time with Timothy Leary and explain the difference then between meditation and mindfulness and how they are separate.
Okay, well, with mindfulness and meditation, I've never found an agreed upon definition for either one of them. But like with mindfulness, if you go to a class or a training, or you look something up in the internet or listen to YouTube, people will have different definitions of mindfulness, but there's an overlap of you'll usually hear the same key aspects within that definition, and the big ones are purposefully paying attention. And then focusing, and and then quieting yourself and noticing, and doing that in a relaxed state. So you'll hear that with almost everyone's definition of mindfulness. And in meditation, again, it's used interchangeably. And when it is, you can tell by the context whether or not, people can understand what they mean. But in meditation, oftentimes they're referring to a specific method or technique. And a lot of times it has historical context because different religious traditions, or also even, neuroscientists and other people that are developing meditative techniques will say meditation to be clear. And the other thing I notice is it seems to often have a focal point. So those are some of the differences between the two that I see.
When you're talking about those different aspects, the other phrase that I that pops into my head and I think about is self-care. And a lot of folks are talking about making sure they take care of themselves. And I wonder what you would think about some of the prior decades or generations where there wasn't a necessary focus on you taking your own time. It's almost as if you're being selfish to take that time to be present and aware with yourself versus being available to other people out there.
Well, in prior generations, we didn't have to think about that, because we naturally got it throughout our day. We used to go and work the garden, feed the cows. When we're going downtown to pick up something, we'd talk with our neighbor. We remember grandparents sitting on the porch swing, watching kids ride bikes. And those are all mindfulness activities that were built into our day out of a default. So people didn't even think about such things. And now we're so full of distraction and interruption that it's been weeded out of our everyday life.
So with those kind of now built-in distractions, everyone has a phone that will ding no matter, if you get a like or whatever on Facebook, and you have to check it out immediately. Or I remember too, before even the family had our first answering machine, really. You would call the house, and if somebody answered, you would talk. Otherwise, you could be out the whole day and not really have contact with people. So how are you explaining to folks that you come in contact with or folks that you help here to find those opportunities to take a pause while knowing it's hard to do with your phone right there?
Oh yeah, I mean, our default is to, instead of mindfulness, we go into mindlessness, right? And what they call the monkey mind, which I love that image because you just see monkeys going everywhere. It's like, and we're out the door. Oh God, I forgot to get gas. I got to get to the meeting, and I need to make sure I go because I got to go to the bank during lunch to make sure that gets in before that payment. And it just doesn't stop. Oh, and I've got to turn on the radio when I get there and listen to all the horrible things on the news. And so we can end up being this paper that's just blown in the wind all day, and that monkey mind just drags us throughout our day. And so unless we purposefully find a way to weave it in throughout the day, that tension builds, and we end up becoming more stressed, and that affects our health and our well-being. But the nice thing about mindfulness is there are ways to weave that into our day. And so when I speak with people, I often ask them and get a feel for what their daily routine is, right? And to have many different ways they can do that. So whether it's there's times I walk to the espresso stand during lunch, right? So I might do some breathing and mindfulness, just paying attention then, and keeping it simple. Because when I started practicing mindfulness, I made that mistake. I'm going to do the 20-minute meditation, because that was a big thing, and there was so much great research on what it did. I couldn't do that, and so I failed at that, and I still don't do that, and it's not a goal for me to do that. So to have enough techniques where even if it's 3 breaths, and being purposeful about what you're doing with those 3 breaths, or if you are walking, or if you're in the car, there's ways to relax, tuning into your body. And one thing that people don't talk about much is when you do mindfulness exercises, it's important to tune in with where you're at that time. And there's something called exteroceptive state and interoceptive state. So basically it's like, are you paying attention more to your outside environment or your inside? So interoceptive would be your thoughts, your feelings, your sensations on your body, right? And exteroceptive would be your environment. And so, and everything being distracted. If you're in an airport, that's very exteroceptive stimuli going on there.
Is there a benefit to either one of those, or do they both get to the end goal?
It's important to stop. In my opinion, it's important to stop and say, where am I at? Am I being exteroceptively distracted? Do I keep on paying attention to my phone and listening to this conversation over there? Because if that's where you're at, then you'll want to do some interoceptive mindfulness exercises to help you kind of tone that down, right? But the other part of it is if your thoughts are racing and you can't focus because you have to take a test or you have to finish a project, but your interoceptive is kind of going, then you probably want to do some exteroceptive mindfulness techniques.
You mentioned that you were talking about your goals of a 20-minute meditation, and I think for folks to have an uninterrupted 20 minutes would be an amazing thing to have over the course of 24 hours, but it is very tough. So let's go back to some of these 3 breath techniques perhaps, or ways that somebody who's on the move, or a lot of this is geared towards the teachers in the school district. So let's say even during a passing period where one class is over before the next class comes in, are there some simple things that can reframe or refocus somebody to be able to go for that next hour or so before they have to go again?
Yeah, for focus, the breathing techniques would include keeping your inhale and your exhale on the same length. And that's shown because they also, with mindfulness, they look at breath and breath work. And so they found that if you inhale the same length and exhale, that helps with focus. If you, if you inhales are shorter and exhales are longer, and you're feeling a little anxious, that's going to help kind of calm your anxiety.
Okay.
And then if the inhale is longer and exhale is shorter, then that's going to help you focus, if you want to take a test. So
are there specific counts, or is it a kind of half as much or twice as better, or 2 seconds in, 4 seconds out, or 4 seconds in, 2 seconds out? I mean, is that kind of just up to...
That gets into the person.
Sure.
In the states, and for them to tune into their nervous system. And so, like, a lot of people know about the box breathing, 4, 4, 4,
Right.
4, right? And that helps with just paying attention and keeping calm. And it's kind of I think it's one reason why it's popular. It's a good general one that helps with both, is what I've seen. But like, I was talking to someone the other day, and there was something about that 4 count that really bothered her, but she wanted to do 3, and so she did 3.
Okay.
And so some of that is getting lost in the detail stuff. It's more about tuning in, how does this work for me?
Sure. And that, I think, too, is perhaps part of some of the rushing from here to there, and I don't know if it's following the rules about how you do things or things are in a set place, but if I'm not going to be able to do that 4-4-4-4, then what's the point? Or I've already failed before I began. What would you say about that?
It's accumulative. So a little is a lot, and we've got to start somewhere. And even now, there's days that I do better than others, but I just keep going. It's kind of like you're exercising your ability to focus. And so if I fall off the wagon and not go to the gym for a couple weeks, I'm still going to get back in there and start building that muscle, because it is accumulative over time, and you're training your nervous system.
What about, let's bring in to this the rest of the family. So if I'm, waiting to pick up my son from school and I'm able to take a few breaths or refocus my attention, and then as the family gets together, which I know too is a very hard thing these days for everyone to sit together perhaps and have the TV off while you're watching and eating dinner and things like that, but if we're going to have the whole family benefit from this, are there different techniques, or are there group techniques that we can all partake in?
Well, yeah, you can. You can just breathe together and share why you do mindfulness, and help them think about why it might be helpful for them, and having them practice with you breathing, because you think, well, no, everyone knows that. No, they don't. It's not natural. I mean, we don't walk around going, we don't do that. And often we don't want to do that in front of people.
When you're out and about and you were talking about focusing on the external and the externalities of things, are there some simple techniques or things that can help you focus or refocus? For some reason, the first kind of idea that pops into my head as we're moving from fall to winter is if I'm walking down the sidewalk and I happen to see a leaf fall from a tree, to take that time and watch it flutter to the ground, and to then, I don't know if then you think if I was that leaf or whatever, but you're looking at that and you're focusing on that solely for those 2.5 seconds that it's falling to the ground, something like that.
Yeah, you're tuning into a really important aspect of mindfulness, because we're taking in information all the time, right? And then we're going to do a mindfulness exercise. So now we're becoming aware. And mindfulness isn't just becoming aware. What you're describing is we're choosing to perceive something, right? So there's something called, I think Andrew Huberman, he has a podcast. He's a neuroscientist. He's great. He talks about the perceptive spotlight. So we're choosing to focus on something that, from a broad perspective, or we're going to narrow that perspective. And so looking at the leaf would be narrowing that perspective. And that perceptive continuum is a really important aspect of mindfulness. And the way I describe it to people is, okay, let's say you're a scientist in the lab and you're doing your mindfulness, and the awareness is a specimen you're putting underneath a microscope, and then you're looking through it. You kind of have a broader view. But if you turn the fine focus, then you're narrowing that perceptive spotlight and going in and out. And you can also put an intensity on that. And all of that is is part of mindfulness.
Is that too then when you take the time to walk around your block, let's say, and you've done it 30 times every day for a month, then on that 31st time, nothing is different really with the pace of your walk or whatever, but you have then noticed things around the neighborhood that you've never seen before, or you've gone and noticed that your own neighbor's house is a different color than it was, the last time you realized it, and you go, gosh, what happened? I wasn't aware that something like this happened.
Well, because we're taking in so much all the time. It's called neuroceptive, right? So we're taking in the outer environment, the inner environment, the in-between environment, and we naturally just push things aside,
Sure.
right? And so I think that that's a natural part of interacting with the world, and that's another reason why mindfulness is an important tool to learn, is because that way we have more control over what we want to, what our goals are, and so on.
You mentioned at the beginning that it started kind of through the Timothy Leary and the psychedelics and being able to do that, and then as the CTE scans came about in the 90s and you could see people look at pictures of things and different parts of their brain would light up. So if folks are still in that mindset that this is kind of a hippy-dippy kind of thing, where can they go, or what are some of the studies that you have found to be the most impactful when you're talking with folks who aren't fully open to this as a practice?
Well, one thing I would talk about is the polyvagal nerve. And the reason why that's important is it is an important nerve to regulate our states. And when we're doing mindfulness exercises, we're getting into the ventral vagus state. And that's where we want to be, to lower anxiety, to be the most productive, to sleep well, to be present when we're socializing, and so that would be something to study. Is that, because that is mindfulness. They found things like chanting and singing and exercising, and the polyvagal nerve is connected to 9 body organs, and so when we're doing things to stimulate that nerve, we're helping our health, and mindfulness does that. It stimulates the polyvagal nerve.
Are there other, and I know this would move into another category of this, but are there any sort of acupressure points on your body that you've come to learn that helps get you into a state, or is that just something that as you're breathing maybe you can build in? I'm kind of thinking about how when you train a dog, you first work with the treats and then you use the commands, and then you take the treats away and the commands are still there. Are there places that research has shown to help snap you into a more of an aware state as people are walking or waiting for someone to come in?
When I think of, you said acupuncture?
Yeah, I mean, like if you were to press here, or is there some place that if you were working on this, it helps to get you back into that mindful air?
Well, the acupuncture points, as far as I know, and I don't do much of that,
Sure.
but other therapists might get into tapping, and what that is, which is, I think utilizing those points, and it's opening up the meridians, so energy can flow through.
Yeah.
And that's definitely something that helps and works. And if somebody wanted to look at that and find that on the internet, yeah, it would be helpful, because that has a lot of history behind it.
Yeah.
And even things like yoga and qigong and acupuncture is great, will help stimulate that and help the flow.
And again, it's based on the person. Like you said, a 4 count might not work, but a 3 count of breathing works for that person. It's really kind of unique to their own past, I guess, too, and what they are open to understand and learn. How long have you been doing this?
The counseling?
Or just understanding mindfulness and practicing it yourself?
I think that mindfulness is probably the last 5-6 years, just increasing, because they keep on learning stuff every time you turn around. But if you've ever done meditation or silence or exercise, we are all doing mindfulness. But now being purposeful and understanding that it doesn't have to be just the 20-minute meditation or something like that, and it's more broad, then we can adapt it to us. And I think we really need it now, because I don't think that I can think of a time in history where we've had to deal with so much distraction, and mindfulness just helps us approach the chaos of our day. So
I remember, this is just a side story here, but I remember that in college, it really probably took one day, I read The 4 Agreements, which is an old great book, and I whipped through that thing. And the next morning when I woke up and I would walk to school, it was, I have a very clear memory of the colors were brighter, the sounds were more vivid.
Yeah.
And it was really, I don't know what happened in the course of reading that book, but I have a great memory of that next day, and for probably the next couple, maybe a week, I was really noticing things differently, and again, the colors were brighter, the sounds were more vivid, you could hear the wind blowing, and it was really good.
Yeah, it really brought you into that state, and that's a neat experience, because it's something you can refer to, right? And say, this is, to be able to go to that place is possible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you think we didn't talk about that's important to share with folks as we start to wrap this up a bit?
I would just encourage people to start somewhere and take 30 seconds before they start the car, or let's say 15, because you want to go.
Sure.
And just take one breath, check in with your body, where's my tension, and just relax, and then start the car.
And so, okay, let's then say, if somebody does that and they feel something and it's an uncomfortable feeling, or as they learn more about this, it for some reason starts to feel uncomfortable in a way that maybe they're not fully addressing something. You know what I'm saying here? How would you suggest for them to push through that and keep at this?
Well, that's where that spotlight perception comes in, right? Because let's say I have tension in my shoulders, I could do a shoulder roll, or if it's another place in the body, or maybe something I'm going to have to face at work, I'm walking right into, I'll just keep that in focus for a minute, and I'll take 2 deep breaths and relax. And just bring myself into a relaxed state, and try to keep that with me.
Yeah. And it's okay to do that for yourself.
Oh yeah.
It's okay to take that. I mean, if we start with 15 seconds, you're allowed to take 15 seconds for yourself to take some breaths.
And when we take it for ourselves, we're taking it for each other.
Right.
Because when I was talking about that ventral state and stuff where we want to be at, that's a social engagement state too. So if I make sure I'm in that state before I come and speak with you or go to the meeting or whatever it is, I'm bringing my full self.
Right.
And I'm bringing my full skill. And I can tap into that and I can be fully present for you and really listen to you instead of being distracted.
This is a great conversation, and we could go for, I think, another hour here, but I'm talking with Anisa Miller, and she has a practice here in Shelton on 4th between Coda and Railroad. We're going to get this up and available not only for the district, Shelton School District, through the Employee Assistance Program, but also we'll share this out to the public because I think it's got great information and a lot of good tips for folks to be able to take in through the course of the rest of this year, which I know is starting to wrap up, but maybe a good opportunity for those folks to take those New Year's resolutions. Yeah. It's just a couple weeks away, and perhaps 2023 will be a more mindful year for many. Thank you so much.
Yeah, this was fun. I'm glad you could stop by.
Yeah. It was great. Thank you.